Good afternoon. My name is Janine Rose. I am an assistant professor at the University of Toronto, Mississauga, and today I'll be talking about strategies for teaching science students qualitative research in a social science classroom. The presentation is organized as follows. First, I'll talk about the research description, and then I'll provide a definition of qualitative research. I'll then go into describing my research motivations and assumptions about how qualitative research should be taught. I'll then describe my data collection and results, as well as strategies for teaching qualitative research and writing to science students. The research highlights instructional approaches that students found to be most effective for helping them understand the value of qualitative research as a mode of knowledge production in the social sciences. The research also highlights how to develop science students' ability to think and act like qualitative researchers. So what is qualitative research? So the qualitative research approach is committed to understanding social phenomena or how the world is experienced from research participants' standpoint or frame of references. Qualitative researchers investigate various phenomena through a process that is interactive, involved, and emergent. An inductive process of analysis is usually employed to understand and interpret the information collected. And the writing is usually polyvocal in that it references the voices of the research participants in text, and it is supposed to be supported with interpretations by the researcher. So I'll say a little bit about my personal motivations for doing this research, as well as the circumstances surrounding teaching the qualitative research and writing course at Duke University, and this was my former institution before I moved on to the University of Toronto. So I decided to develop a qualitative research course because I've done it for so many years. I've done it in my own, used it in my own research, and I've also done so many courses related to qualitative approaches. And I knew my students would benefit from exposure to this form of research. However, it was extremely challenging because all of the students who took this course were very much rooted in the scientific method and came from institutions where the scientific method was practiced very heavily, and every other research method outside of that was devalued. Every day was an uphill battle because I felt like I was like a sales associate trying to get my students to buy into the idea that qualitative research is valuable. And so I was motivated to write this piece with the hope that those instructors dealing with similar teaching circumstances may gain insight from what I learned from my own students. So there are several assumptions and arguments in the scholarship of teaching and learning about qualitative research that informs this research project. One is that qualitative research is usually taught to graduate level students who have had some exposure to qualitative principles. And like I said before, this research project involved undergraduate students. So this is a little bit different from what you usually see in the scholarship. The second is that experiential learning is often argued as the way to provide experience with data collection methods in qualitative research. And this is seen as the best way to teach students because it gives them direct experience in the field. And finally, teaching qualitative research is said to usually involve emphasis on the procedural steps involved in carrying out qualitative approaches. So students are usually taught these procedural steps when giving them information about qualitative research. So the research addresses two issues. One, there is a need for more research on best practices for teaching students at the undergraduate level qualitative research principles. And two, the research addresses the importance of developing specific pedagogical approaches suited to a particular student demographic and approaches that focus on transforming ways of thinking amongst students on a particular subject matter. So I'll say a little bit about my data collection now. So for this project, a reflective writing task was used as a research tool. There is increasing use of reflective writing as a means of data collection in qualitative research, and you can take a look at some of the studies I've cited here. Reflective writing activities and journals are not only effective as metacognitive tasks, but they also offer teachers like myself the opportunity to hear students' voices as they express their thoughts on their own learning experience. And the reflective writing activity that I used in this project was very insightful because students were able to write in a very detailed manner what was most valuable about the things that they learned. So I'll offer some more specific points about the data collection method here. So students were prompted to write a reflection that described the tasks and readings that facilitated their understanding of qualitative research. They were also asked to explain why they felt that the task or reading that was assigned to them made a difference for their understanding of the subject matter. After receiving ethics approval, the reflections were de-identified to protect the identities of the students who participated. And more than 30% of the students provided consent to use their reflections in the research. However, the pandemic did create some challenges for me, and I actually moved on to another institution in that year. So needless to say, I did not get as many responses responses from the students regarding consent to use their reflections in the research. But still, I was able to get some information from 30% of the respondents, and the responses were still very insightful and useful for understanding some of the things that were valuable in that course. Here are the research results. So of the students who provided consent to use their writing in this research, more than half stated that the interview project that involved completing a qualitative interview with an immigrant in the local community and writing an analysis of the interview information enhanced their understanding of the qualitative approach. They also highlighted that readings that differentiated philosophies that informed research approaches that fell within the conventional paradigm, such as the scientific method, and the alternative paradigm under which a qualitative research approach falls, made a difference for their understanding of how qualitative research differs from quantitative research. They also identified class activities that included comparing qualitative and quantitative information related to the same phenomenon as useful for their understanding of the differences in the type of knowledge produced by experimental approaches and qualitative approaches. So today I will discuss one of the activities named by the respondents, namely the interview project in this presentation. So more than half of the students who provided consent to use their writing in this research identified the interview project as a main task that enhanced their understanding of qualitative research. The findings reinforce the existing scholarship that emphasizes the importance of using experiential learning coupled with didactic approaches to effectively teach qualitative research and writing, and getting students to develop the habits of mind that will allow them to appreciate and value qualitative research. Now, to support students' examination of immigration experiences in this project, we of course read and discussed pieces that engaged qualitative research and also examined immigrant stories. They also got to see models of qualitative writing from the pieces that I selected. So we used each scholarly piece in multiple ways. so that students are not only seeing qualitative research as it's used by scholars, but they're also seeing how this research is actually written up in reality. Additionally, we develop interview questions while also examining the literature that provides a set of guidelines on how to develop effective qualitative questions. Specifically, these qualitative questions should not be leading and be open enough for interviewees to discuss a variety of issues related to the subject matter in question. We also do mock interviews because that's an important skill when doing qualitative research. So students learn how best to ask questions. They also read and learn about their positionality and how that shapes the interview setting and the level of detail they get from interviewees. Students also read about validity procedures in qualitative research, and we also compare qualitative validity procedures to validity procedures in quantitative and scientific research. They learn to use one qualitative validity procedure in the research project, and this is member checking, which involves sharing transcriptions and results of their research with the respondents and asking respondents for their comments about whether or not the results of the research truly reflect their experience. With that said, qualitative research truly depends on heavily collaborating and cooperating with the interviewees, and I wanted my students to understand that the efficacy of qualitative research is dependent on relationships they build with the respondents. They write a paper at the end of this research project, but they also write a reflective piece that centers on comparing their experiences in the field with what they have learned from the literature on qualitative research and writing. And I think that this metacognitive exercise really cements their understanding of the procedures and the lessons learned from their experiences, and how these procedures enhance the rigor of the qualitative research process, as well as how the actual research experience may be different from theory. So students really get to see the rigor involved in qualitative research. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these students came in with the perspective that qualitative research was not rigorous at all. And so through this process and through this experience, their thinking about this research is transformed. So this marks the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening. And if you have any questions that are relevant to the presentation, please feel free to email me at janine.rose@utoronto.ca.